pra Oslo, pra sair no Oslodum. Bloco asfro da terra do bacalhau.
Oi, tudo bem? Welcome to this fifth lesson in the series I'm creating to help you to jumpstart your Brazilian Portuguese. I'm Professor Jason. Today I'll be teaching you about the names for the days of the week, the months of the year, and just enough numbers to talk about dates. We'll also talk about how this vocab can be used to ask about or express when people do things or when things take place. That's it. Então, vamos começar. Let's get started. Okay, so as usual, I want to start off by giving you a quick overview of what we'll see in this lesson. Let's start by talking about the terms for the days of the week in Brazilian Portuguese, present some related words and phrases. Then I'll provide some structures for asking and saying what day of the week it is. We'll do the same, but we'll ask and say when somebody does something or when things occur. Then we'll switch gears and talk a little bit about the months of the year and some related vocabulary. Move on to talk about the numbers 1 through 31, so we can start to talk about dates, and then provide the structures for asking and saying what the date is, and also asking and saying what day an event is or will be held. Alright, so on this slide and on the next 6 slides, I'm going to go over the names of the days of the week in Brazilian Portuguese. You'll also hear me pronounce them. What I want to do is pronounce each of them maybe 2 or 3 times, give you a chance to repeat the sounds, okay? Now you can see that the first 5 weekdays, I have these arranged from Monday through the weekend. The first 5 weekdays all end with the word feira, but they can be shortened to just, for example, segunda, terça, quarta, etc. You'll see that on some of the slides later in the presentation. All right, let's run through these really quick. Monday is segunda-feira, 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 or just segunda. Tuesday, terça-feira, 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 or just terça. Wednesday, quarta-feira, 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 or just quarta. Thursday, quinta-feira, 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 or simply quinta. Friday, sexta-feira, 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 or just sexta. Notice that those first 5 weekdays are singular and feminine. So you might say a terça, a quinta. Finally, the days for the weekend. Saturday is sábado, sábado, sábado. And Sunday, domingo, domingo, domingo. So Spanish speakers will recognize that the weekend days are the same in Spanish and Brazilian Portuguese, but they have to memorize the weekdays. That's the big change. And something else that I tried to point out on these slides is the fact that in Brazilian Portuguese, as in Spanish, the names for the days of the week are not capitalized. Okay, now that we've mastered the vocabulary for the days of the week in Brazilian Portuguese, let's look at one structure in which we could use these. For example, if we want to ask what day of the week it is or say what day of the week it is. You can see on this slide the formula for asking, or the phrase for asking, is simply que dia da semana é hoje? Que dia da semana é hoje? And the person answers by saying hoje é, and then the name of the day. And on the next slide here, we have some examples of that. Next 2 slides, some examples of that structure being used. So he might say, que dia da semana é hoje? She says, today is Friday. Hoje é sexta. Or, hoje é sexta-feira. She can say it either way. Que dia da semana é hoje? Hoje é quarta. Or, hoje é quarta-feira. Que dia da semana é hoje? Hoje é segunda. Or, Hoje é segunda-feira. Que dia da semana é hoje? Hoje é domingo. Hoje é domingo. Alright, so before moving on, I just wanted to present a few more terms that are related to days of the week, and some of these we've already used, days of the week, etc. So we have o dia, as in the expression, que dia da semana é hoje? Dia is day. Hoje, today. Hoje. Hoje é quarta. Amanhã. Amanhã. Amanhã means tomorrow. So if hoje é quarta, amanhã é quinta-feira. Ontem. Ontem means yesterday. Ontem. The term for week or the word for week is semana. A semana. Weekend, o fim de semana. Fim de semana. If I want to say last week, I add passada. A semana passada. So you'll notice that semana is singular and feminine. So this modifier, this adjective passada, has to be also singular feminine. A semana passada. Next week, a próxima semana. A próxima semana. One way in which we can use some of these terms to refer to time, things like hoje, a próxima semana, amanhã, or certain days of the week, is asking and saying what day someone will do or does something. So you can see the forms here. I can use que dia if I wanted the specific day, que dia, then the subject and the verb, or quando, subject plus verb. Now I know we haven't spoken a lot about verbs, but we'll get to it, so just trust me, I'm going to use some really common verbs, verbs you might recognize if you know some Spanish. We would answer by putting the subject or the person's name typically first, then the verb, the activity they do, and then the day, which is the adjunct information that we're supplying. Okay? So someone might ask, for example, que dia José trabalha? Or quando José trabalha? If he works today, I could say, José trabalha hoje. José trabalha hoje. Or que dia Ana chega? What day does she arrive? Or quando Ana chega? She arrives tomorrow. Ana chega amanhã. Ana chega amanhã. Which days or what days does Camilo have class? Quais dias or em que dias Camilo tem aula? Camilo tem aula às segundas, quartas e sextas. What we just saw in that previous slide about when Camilo had class, right? Camilo tem aula às segundas, quartas e sextas was how you deal with recurring events on days of the week, events that happen every certain day of the week. And in Brazilian Portuguese, the way you do that is, if they're weekdays, you use the preposition a plus the indefinite article as. So you might say, we have class on Mondays. Temos aula às segundas, on Mondays. Or we study Portuguese on Wednesdays. Estudamos português às quartas. If it's a weekend day, sábado ou domingo, since those days are masculine, you take that same preposition a and you add the definite article os. Okay? Jantamos em casa aos sábados. We eat at home, we have dinner at home on Saturdays. Vamos ao cinema aos domingos. Vamos ao cinema aos domingos. We go to the theater, the movie theater, on Sundays. However, when it comes to indicating a specific future instance of something that somebody does and we want to indicate the day of the week, then we don't have, typically, in more formal Brazilian Portuguese anyways, we don't have any kind of article or preposition plus article, which is contrary to Spanish, because you'll recall if you speak a little Spanish that if I want to say we have class on Monday, I say tenemos clase el lunes, or el lunes tenemos clase, or José's party is on Sunday. Again, this is a specific instance and I'm naming the day. La fiesta de José es el domingo. So we have that definite article in Spanish, el, before the day of the week if we're talking about a specific instance. In Portuguese, this disappears. So that same thought, right? We have class on Monday, meaning this Monday. I would say, segunda temos aula, no article. Segunda temos aula. Or José's party is this or is on Sunday. I would say, a festa de José é domingo. Now, many speakers of Brazilian Portuguese will, in fact, though, insert the word or the expression na or no, which are combinations or contractions of the preposition em and the definite article a and o, and say something like, na segunda temos aula, or a festa do José é no domingo. This is extremely common in Brazil. But again, just go back, review this slide, because there's an important distinction between Brazilian Portuguese and Spanish when we're talking about specific instances occurring in the near future on a day of the week. Okay, now we're going to move on to the terms for the months of the year in Brazilian Portuguese, or os meses do ano. Starting with January, janeiro, janeiro, fevereiro, fevereiro, março, março, abril, abril, maio, maio, junho, junho. July is julho, julho. Agosto, agosto. Setembro, setembro. Outubro, outubro. Novembro, novembro. And dezembro, dezembro. And as I mentioned with the days of the week, also the terms for the months in Brazilian Portuguese are generally not capitalized. And on the next slide, I've just put some words that, again, are related to talking about months and dates. So we have a data, which is the date. A data. O mês. O mês. Last month, o mês passado. Mês passado. Next month, o próximo mês. O próximo mês. Year is ano. O ano. Last year, o ano passado. O ano passado. Next year, o próximo ano. O próximo ano. Again, just some extra vocabulary that may or may not come up when we're talking about dates and the idea of months and years. Okay, and speaking of dates, we're closing in on the ability to be able to ask the date and state the date, but sort of now the element we're missing are the numbers, and obviously to talk about dates we're going to at least need to know the numbers 1 through 31. In another lesson I'll go 0 through 1,000,000, but today we just need 1 through 31. So let's learn these. Number 1 is um. Now you need to be aware also that there is a feminine form of the numbers 1 and 2. So you have or uma, and then we'll see in a minute that sometimes we also need the ordinal form, primeiro. Primeiro. So uma, primeiro. Number 2 also has a singular and a masculine form, dois, or duas. Most of the time when we're dealing with dates in Portuguese, we're going to be using the masculine form, and dois. Let's keep going. 3, três, 4, quatro, 5, seis, seis, sete, sete, oito, oito, nove, nove, 10, 10. And now numbers 11 through 20. 11, 11, 12, 12, 13, 13, 14, 14, 15, 15, 16, 16, 17, 17. I have to stop here and say I'm presenting the numbers in Brazilian Portuguese because in Portugal these numbers are spelled and pronounced, these 16 through 19, a little bit different. They might say 16, 17. Brazilian Portuguese is as you see written here, 16, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20, 20, 20. Okay, so in our last grouping here we have 21, 21, 22, 22, 23, 23, 24, 24, 26, 27, 28, 29, and 30 is 30, 30, 31, 31, 31. Okay, so let's talk about asking or saying what the date is in Brazilian Portuguese. And of course there is more than one way to do this. So on the next 3 slides I'll show you I think 3 or 4 different ways, very similar, and I'll present this in the ask and answer format. The ask, I'll give you the phrase, a commonly used phrase, and under answer some sort of constructions or structures for answering that. Okay, but this is somewhat flexible. Okay, so focus on the examples perhaps. First way is just qual a data de hoje? Qual a data de hoje? Qual a data de hoje? What's today's date, literally? Then you answer by saying hoje é, then the day of the week. This is the more formal form. Hoje é plus day of the week plus the number of that calendar plus the preposition de and then the name of the month. So for example, qual a data de hoje? More formally I could say hoje domingo, 25 de agosto. Or I could answer by just saying hoje é, then the number of the calendar plus day plus the month. Qual a data de hoje? Hoje é dia 25 de agosto. Hoje é dia 25 de agosto. Or, without the form dia before the number, which is very common in spoken Brazilian Portuguese, to say hoje é dia 25, hoje é dia 21, for example, I can leave that extra dia out and just cut right to the number, right? Qual data de hoje? Hoje é 25 de agosto. Qual a data de hoje? Hoje é 25 de agosto. É 25 de agosto. I could also ask or use this form, que dia é hoje? Que dia é hoje? Now, earlier in this presentation we saw a similar question which was, que dia da semana é hoje? So if I leave out that expression, da semana, most speakers of Brazilian Portuguese will assume I'm asking about the date of the month. Que dia é hoje? So you can see from the answer format, I can use the parenthetical or optional word dia in my response, plus the number plus the month. So if somebody were to ask me, que dia é hoje? I could say, dia 25 de agosto. Or I could just say, 25 de agosto. Que dia é hoje? 25 de agosto. And here we have the last couple of forms that are pretty common. Somebody might ask, que dia do mês é hoje? Que dia do mês é hoje? Or, em que dia do mês estamos? What day are we on? Em que dia do mês estamos? The answer again is, I can say dia or not, provide the number, and then say the month or not. Okay? So, like I said, the answer is flexible. Que dia do mês é hoje? Or, em que dia do mês estamos? Responses could be dia 25 de agosto, dia 3 de maio, or just dia 25, dia 3, or simply, que dia do mês é hoje? 25. Now, we're going to talk a lot more about dates in the next lesson, lesson 6, which focuses more in depth on numbers in Brazilian Portuguese. But before moving on, I wanted to just highlight a couple of interesting differences and maybe a similarity or two between Spanish and Brazilian Portuguese, since I think many of you may have some training in Spanish. So one of them you can see on this slide, one difference, in that when you say dates, when you express dates in Spanish, if I say, hoy es el 24 de enero, I insert the definite article el before the number. Hoy es el 24. But in Brazilian Portuguese, you don't do that. There is no definite article o or u before the days in Brazilian Portuguese dates. So if somebody asks, qual a data de hoje? And I say, hoje 24 de janeiro, or hoje dia 24. I can't insert the o, which would be a parallel to the Spanish. So if you know Spanish, this is one thing you have to unlearn. However, there is a similarity too, because as with Spanish, in Brazilian Portuguese, when a date falls on the first of the month, instead of using the cardinal number or uno, we typically use the ordinal number primero in Spanish or primeiro in Brazilian Portuguese, as these examples show. So in Spanish, I might say her birthday is on October 1st. I would say su cumpleaños es el primero de octubre. Again, there's that definite article I underlined for emphasis. Su cumpleaños es el primero de octubre. But in Brazilian Portuguese, well, I would leave out the article, but also use the ordinal number. Seu aniversário é primero de outubro. Or the forms, seu aniversário é dia primero de outubro. Or even, é no dia primero de outubro. Sometimes Brazilian Portuguese speakers will form a contraction with the preposition em and the article o and say no dia. Okay, we'll see more of these examples later on. So, seu aniversário é dia primeiro de outubro if it's on the first of a month. Okay, now let's finish up this presentation with one more question and answer structure, right? One more way that you can talk about when things are going to happen. In this case, it's asking or saying what day or when an event will be held, okay? So I have a couple of different question forms you can use. Que dia é, and then the event, or quando é, plus the event. Person will answer if they know, right? The event, whatever the event is, a festa, a prova, right? O aniversário, and then the form é, which again is the third person singular, the verb ser, if you remember previous lessons, and then the day, or maybe the date, depending on the nature of the event and how specific and how near it is in time. So just a few examples of this to close out our lesson. Que dia é a festa? What day is the party? A festa é domingo. Or remember, I might say more colloquially, a festa é no domingo. Que dia é a festa? A festa é no domingo. It's on Sunday. Que dia é a prova? A prova é amanhã. The quiz or the test is tomorrow. Que dia é a prova? A prova é amanhã. Or if it's maybe a couple weeks out and I want to tell the person the date, I can give the date as well. A prova é dia 3 de maio. A prova é dia 3 de maio. Or a prova é no dia 3 de maio. When is your birthday? Quando é o seu aniversário? Quando é seu aniversário? Response: meu aniversário é amanhã, if it were tomorrow, right? Meu aniversário é amanhã. Or perhaps, meu aniversário é na próxima semana. It's next week. Or if I want to say the date, if it's still a ways out, or the person's asking me because they're filling out some kind of form. Quando é seu aniversário? Meu aniversário é no dia 5 de abril. Again, that no is optional, and it comes from the contraction between preposition on, or em, and the article o, but it's optional. Quando é seu aniversário? Meu aniversário é dia 5 de abril. Alright, that's it for Lesson 5 in my Basic Brazilian Portuguese series. I hope you found this information on the days of the week, months of the year, numbers and dates to be easy to understand, informative, and helpful and useful. If so, please do share it with others, and be sure to let me know if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, okay? As always, thank you very much for watching. Be sure to catch my next lesson. See you then. Até breve. Ciao.
Eu vou pra Oslo, pra sair no Oslodum, um bloco afro da terra do Pará.